Alright everyone, the Chinese have mobilized a bunch of soldiers and moved them to their border with North Korea. 150,000, I believe it's two different divisions specifically there. They're in the region in order to prevent, influx of refugees from North Korea. If there's ever like a war or some major famine, some other disaster, an earthquake wipes Pyongyang off the map and people start flooding the Chinese border. The idea is they're probably not going across the DMZ because they die. There's so many landmines there, and probably like 99% of them would keel over. So they wait until the rivers freeze over in China, and they sort of walk across, and they pay off the guards to keep them from shooting them or something. And they got to be very careful about it, otherwise they end up aired out on the ice, so to speak. This does not mean imminent war, though. So we need to stop the slightly paranoid rhetoric. And the other thing people need to realize, for the U.S. audience, North Korea does not have miniaturization for their nuclear weapons. Atomic weapons, very rudimentary 40s and early 50s era style systems. They don't have the ability to put an atomic warhead on a missile. They have the ability to rig it up in a sub and idle it off the coast and maybe blow it up. That's probably all they can do as far as attacking anything that we've got other than Hawaii and coastal Alaska, and they probably can't do that with any degree of great accuracy. Essentially what they'd have to do is put an atomic weapon on a plane, like dropping it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that style of thing, and then they'd have to fly it to their target. The problem being the whole area is heavily militarized. They probably wouldn't even get off the runway. So people worrying about them nuking us are fooling themselves. It's not going to happen. The risk of actual hot war, though, on the Korean Peninsula does exist. It is real. It wouldn't be World War III, but it would be Korean War 2.0. Really, it'd just be a reheating of a war that's been technically ongoing since the middle of the 50s. A very, very long period without an actual peace settlement. And what would happen is that some permutation of the U.S., China, Japan, South Korea would be involved. There would be regime change. Now, even if the Chinese were to storm the border and turn North Korea into a total puppet, that is, they get rid of the Juche shit and they put a mixed model economy in place under basically nominal Chinese leadership, it would still improve. Even China, with its human rights abuses, its economic weakness in terms of central planning and so forth, even that would be way better than what they've got. So if China does it, who cares? Life still improves for the average North Korean. Pretty soon, they'll actually know what it's like to eat meat, other than something they got off the black market for selling their own labor off in slavery for a month or something. It would still improve. And that's under a regime that still calls itself communist. That's how bad things are in North Korea. If the United States wants to do any warmongering at all, and have it not be internationally condemned and actually useful to the world, it should be in North Korea, not Syria, not some fucking Middle Eastern regime, some East African regime or something. No, we should be involved in North Korea. It seems that Trump and Jinping have finally come to the conclusion that Obama's strategy, that I think the Chinese accepted at the time, of waiting, sit back, full sanctions, China participates, and the idea was their regime would collapse. Kim Jong-un would eventually get killed off. Somebody would rise up. They would end up becoming a Chinese puppet. That's why China accepted the idea. And Obama probably had no problem with that because he's like, yeah, but they're kind of a vassal of China anyway. They're not really part of the world economy. Maybe that would actually be beneficial for everybody in the world. That's probably the thing to do. It didn't work. Years and years go by. The sanctions do nothing. The embargo does nothing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't collapse the North Korean regime. You've now got a situation where even elements of the corporate media that really hate Trump, honestly, are kind of on board with the idea of at least striking their atomic facilities. It probably will happen within the next few years. Will it happen now? Probably not. At any given point, it's unlikely, but in a longer span, it's basically assured. Yeah, eventually there will be a reheating of the Korean War. What will trigger it, for certain, is if they develop true miniaturization, because nobody is going to tolerate it. That brings Japan into focus. Right now, if North Korea wanted to attack Japan, they'd have to do it by plane. They could fire missiles, but they wouldn't be nuclear missiles. But they could put an atomic weapon on a plane and fly it over. It wouldn't really work, though. The Japanese would shoot it right out of the sky very, very easily. The South Koreans would probably be able to intercept such a craft before it flew over their territory, too. You'd have a nuke going off in the middle of the DMZ, clear out some of those mines or something like that. But if they were to develop that capability, at least for their shorter range missiles, yeah, it'd bring Japan into the targeting range, parts of coastal Russia. The Russians might march in. They might decide to bomb North Korea. It would make them a total outcast in the world. They wouldn't have even the slightest diplomatic ties with China. The Chinese would totally back off and let what happens happen. Now, the Chinese, like I said, I think they have come to an agreement with Trump on the issue. What form it's going to take as far as what we end up doing is not yet clear. Trump has shown that he doesn't really like to show all of his cards unless he's doing so for strategic purposes. So we may get one of those surreal moments where in the middle of the night a snap press conference happens and Trump comes out to talk to the American people and says, we've decided we can no longer tolerate an atomic North Korea. We're going to start bombing their facilities and their infrastructure. And we would expect that there might be a response. They might start attacking South Korea, so we may have to go all in. It's possible. And if that happens, China would probably be on board with that. They'll either take over some of the mineral-rich northern provinces, make that sort of a puppet, or they'll annex some land in return for getting the problem off of their doorstep. To China, you have to think about this. China used to see North Korea as basically a bulwark against South Korea and some of these other East and Southeast Asian states that were all West-aligned. That is, it was a backwards vassal state that nonetheless had a lot of manpower, a lot of older equipment, and which nobody really wanted to spend the time to screw around with, so it sort of guarded that part of their land border. Now they probably have begun to see it as a liability. If they didn't, they wouldn't have agreed with Obama to participate in the sanctions in the first place that didn't work. Since they didn't work, what options are really left on the table? Strategic strikes against their atomic systems, against their test sites and so forth, their missile launching stations. And if you can denigrate those, North Korea is no longer a threat. It'd take them another decade to rebuild. You could just strike them again. Maybe they'd get the message. North Korea would begin to destabilize and China will march in. That is, the U.S. takes care of some of their more technologically advanced systems. And then hopefully no war actually breaks out and the Chinese end up taking care of the problem because now they don't have to worry about mass casualties so much. The other possibility is war does break out. South Korea will get pounded, but they'd have to be on board with this. But I mean, is South Korea going to sit there? Would they want a fully atomic North Korea either, with a North Korea capable of putting a warhead on one of these missiles so that their own capability to defend against like a plane trying to fly over would be greatly lessened? Would the Japanese sit back? There may come a surreal moment at which the Japanese declare war on North Korea. They say, we're not dealing with it anymore. We're going to act unilaterally. Anyone who wants to come in and help can help, but we're not dealing with this shit anymore. And they have the ability to do that. North Korea doesn't have the ability to fight back against a standardized modern military. It simply doesn't. No, North Korea is not going to nuke the United States. If they did, if they made the grave mistake of attempting to fly or sail an atomic weapon off California's coast or something like that and detonate it, they wouldn't exist anymore. They'd be flattened out of existence. We wouldn't even need to use nuclear weapons. I don't think the U.S. would even if we did, if Hawaii got hit with an atomic warhead from North Korea, I don't even think we'd deploy nuclear weapons. We'd say, that's rather cute. Old 40s style atomic weapon. Very, very impressive. And then we'd launch a few thousand missiles in there. We'd lay waste to their ability to fight back. We'd march in. We'd say, oh, well, now it's just reunified Korea. And it's probably the one part of the world where we would ultimately be positively received for such a role. It would be a war that's actually winnable, unlike these fucking proxy conflicts. As for China defending them, or getting into a war with the U.S. over North Korea of all places, I don't see that happening. There was already a loose framework of agreement under Obama. Under his inept foreign policy, he still had the ability to hammer something out on paper with China. Now we've got Trump in office, who's already shown, I can go rogue and bomb a country. I'm not going to face repercussions. In fact, His approval ticks upwards after he warmongers in Syria. I don't support it, but ultimately, yeah, a lot of the centrists, they don't have a problem with it. In fact, they kind of liked it. I guess the return to W style, like cowboy foreign policy or something. I may not like it. You may not like it. Apparently, other people do, though. Look, it's again, it's surrealism after a sort that people would actually support such a thing. But his support would skyrocket if he took care of the North Korean problem. Just bomb their nuclear facilities. Get rid of those. North Korea is no longer really a threat to anything outside of its very, very small region. South Korea, China, little bit of Russia, and possibly Japan. Those are the only parties that would then be concerned. As far as their naval and air power, it's a joke, honestly. So people worried because we're sending a carrier group up their coast. Well, we've done that before. We've always been sailing naval vessels right next to their territorial waters. They don't have the ability to do anything about it. They'll sit there and issue vague threats. But there is a possibility we end up striking them. Yeah, and if we do, yeah, it could go hot. That's about all. Peace out.